4 boys have been rescued after being trapped in a cave in northern Thailand. The boys and their football coach became stranded underground more than 2 weeks ago after being caught out by sudden torrential rain.
November 24th, 2009. John Jones, an experienced caver, thought this would be a simple adventure. A family outing to the Nutty Putty Cave. A chance to reconnect with the past, to explore the familiar tunnels of his youth. But he had no idea what lay ahead. Nutty Putty Cave, a seemingly harmless name. A beginner's cave, they said. But beneath its surface, it was anything but. The air was thick with dread, even before John stepped foot inside. John wasn't new to caving. He knew the risks, had explored other caves in Utah. But he hadn't been in years. Life had pulled him away. He was a medical student now, a father, a husband. He never imagined this would be his last adventure. John, his brother Josh, and a group of friends ventured into the heart of Nutty Putty, drawn by the thrill of the unknown. They explored the main chambers first, smooth paths, wide rooms. But then, John and Josh decided to push deeper into the cave, to seek the challenge of the narrow, tight passageways, the birth canal, a tunnel known for its suffocating squeeze, its claustrophobic grip. The moment John slipped into that passage, he felt the walls close in around him. The tunnel seemed to narrow, twist, and spiral, each turn more agonizing than the last. He thought it was just another tight squeeze, just another challenge. But as the darkness closed in, John realized he was stuck. His body pressed against the rock, his legs twisted in unnatural ways. His breath came in shallow gasps, his arms pinned by the walls, his chest slowly compressing with every desperate inhale. He tried to move, but the more he struggled, the more the earth held him captive. The minutes turned to hours. His brother Josh came to his side, but there was nothing they could do. The walls of the cave seemed to mock their efforts. John couldn't turn around. He couldn't go forward. The space was too tight, the rock too unforgiving. John called out to Josh, but the words felt far away. "Don't follow me. Go back." But it was too late. The cave had him now. The minutes turned to hours, and John slowly began to lose his fight. As his body began to give in to the crushing weight of the rock, his mind fought to hold on. His last breaths shallow, each one more difficult than the last. John's body was trapped, but his spirit? His spirit was trapped in the depths of that cave, where silence ruled and hope faded with every passing second. This was the slow, agonizing demise of John Jones, a man once full of life, now swallowed by the very earth he loved to explore. He would never see his family again. He would never taste the air of the world. This was no longer an adventure. It was a nightmare, and the cave would keep its secrets forever. The rescue teams would arrive, but it was already too late. John Jones was left to rest forever in the heart of Nutty Putty Cave. But as one nightmare ended, another began. The horrors of the caves don't stop in Utah. Far from it. In the quiet darkness of the Gollum Cave, nestled in the shadow of Y Mountain, another group of explorers would meet a similar fate. A fate where curiosity would prove deadly, and the very air they breathed would betray them. On August 17, 2005, 5 young adventurers, full of excitement, laughter, and the thrill of discovery, descended into the murky depths of Gollum Cave. For them, it was supposed to be just another adventure, a simple challenge, something to tell stories about. But they didn't know that the cave was already waiting for them, and it would not let them leave. The entrance was narrow, just a small crack in the earth, barely noticeable to the untrained eye. But to these young cavers, it was a secret treasure, an untouched path that promised to reveal more of the unknown. They had heard whispers of it, the Cave of Death, and like so many before them, they couldn't resist. Jennifer Gilbrath had been through this watery tunnel before, but it hadn't prepared her for what lay ahead. She had nearly passed out from hypothermia on her last trip. Yet despite the dangers, she was eager to share the experience with her friends. Blake Donner, Scott McDonald, and Ariel Singer followed her in, one by one, each of them venturing deeper into the choking darkness. But something was wrong. The air in the cave was thick, heavy with the scent of damp stone. The oxygen levels began to dwindle, though they couldn't know it just yet. No one could hear the faint warning whispers of the earth itself, slowly suffocating them. The entrance had been deceptively simple, just a narrow, shallow tunnel that required only a short swim to reach the inner cave. But inside it was another world. Cold, dark, still. There was room to stand, yes, but barely. The air grew thin, and as they moved further in, something began to change. The quiet whispers of excitement were replaced by the heavy silence of desperation. Jennifer, the first to enter, couldn't find the exit. She had misjudged the tunnel in her haste. The others followed, but one by one they found themselves trapped in the same suffocating space, fighting to get air, fighting to live. One by one they lost their way. Ariel was next to feel it, the cold rush of panic. She swam toward the exit, but the water, once so inviting, now felt like a prison. The air was growing stale, thicker with each passing minute. The friends, once full of laughter, now began to feel the suffocating weight of their situation. By the time Blake reached the exit, the others had already started to panic. He found Ariel, but she was lifeless, floating in the dark waters. He tried to push her forward, but the air was gone. The oxygen had evaporated, and there was no more room for breath. As he struggled, the panic set in, the feeling of the walls closing in. The cave had claimed them, one by one, as they gasped for air in its suffocating embrace. In the end, the body count was not just from the physical peril of the narrow tunnels. It was the air itself, betraying them with each breath they took. By the time help arrived, it was too late. The four friends, Jennifer, Ariel, Blake, and Scott, had succumbed to the cold grip of the cave. Their lives taken, not by sharp rocks or collapsing tunnels, but by the very air they had once breathed freely. The cave was sealed. No one would venture there again. The Cave of Death, they called it, but for those who didn't return, it was more than a name. It was their final resting place. Yet the caves were not done with them. In Devil's Den, the walls would close in tighter than ever, trapping the explorers in an even more merciless grip. Far from the cold depths of Gollum Cave, another tragedy was quietly waiting to unfold in the heart of Arkansas. A place known for its jagged rocks, narrow passages, and the quiet whispers of danger, Devil's Den Cave. A name that seemed to promise adventure but delivered nothing but death. On March 10, 2001, a young adventurer named Kenny Nelson, full of excitement, joined his church group for an outing into this notorious cave. But like all who dare to challenge the earth's darkness, they didn't know what lay ahead. They only saw the promise of a thrill, the allure of the unknown. But in the depths, the earth had other plans. Devil's Den was not an ordinary cave. It was a labyrinth, a twisting maze of rock that seemed to shift and turn with every step you took. But for Kenny, it wasn't the turns or the twists that would seal his fate. It was a single tight opening, a crevice barely wide enough for a child. Yet his curiosity drove him forward, deeper into the trap. The opening was just 12 inches wide. A challenge, yes, but for Kenny, the challenge was irresistible. He crawled through the narrow passage, convinced that there was something waiting for him on the other side. What he didn't realize was that the earth was already waiting for him to make that mistake. And once he was inside, there would be no turning back. As Kenny squeezed deeper into the crevice, he felt it, the walls closing in around him. The tightness, the crushing pressure against his ribs, the suffocating weight of the cave. At first it seemed manageable, but soon he realized he was stuck. The passage, once inviting, now felt like a prison. His arms were pinned at awkward angles, his chest pressed so tightly against the rock that he could barely breathe. Panic set in. He tried to move, to push himself free, but the more he struggled, the more the cave refused to let him go. It was as if the earth had a grip on him, one that wouldn't release until it was too late. His friends, realizing he was in trouble, rushed to his aid. but there was nothing they could do. The tightness of the passage, the lack of space, everything conspired against them. They couldn't pull him out. They couldn't shift the rocks. All they could do was stand helplessly, listening to Kenny's panicked gasps for air. And as time wore on, their desperation grew. The hours passed, and the situation grew worse. Kenny's body began to lose its fight against the crushing rock. His breath grew more shallow, his limbs numb, and with every passing minute, he could feel the strength draining from his body. His mind raced, fighting the panic, but the cave, it was too powerful. By the time help arrived, it was too late. The rescuers could do nothing but retrieve his lifeless body from the tight crevice where he had been trapped. Kenny Nelson, a young man with so much life ahead of him, was taken by the earth, his body squeezed into the rocks of Devil's Den Cave, never to be freed. And as the cave closed its jaws around him, his friends, his family, and the rescuers were left in the suffocating silence. The walls of Devil's Den had taken yet another soul, and it would never give him back. From suffocating passages to the unyielding depths of Mossdale, the cave's cruelty knew no bounds, and no one was safe from its grip. This is the story of 6 explorers, brave and unaware of the horrors lurking in the Mossdale Caves, England, a cave that would never let them leave. It was June of 1967 when 6 adventurers, eager to test their courage, entered the Mossdale Caves, their hearts full of excitement. What began as an exploration of the unknown quickly became a race against time, a race they would never win. The air was thick with the promise of discovery, but what they didn't realize was that discovery would come at a terrible cost. The passageways of Mossdale were narrow, the rock jagged, scraping against their bodies as they crawled through the tight tunnels. The further they ventured, the tighter the cave seemed to become, as if it were alive, pulling them deeper into its suffocating grip. But they pressed on, undeterred by the oppressive atmosphere. After all, they were experienced cavers prepared for anything. Except what the cave would do next. It was when the group reached a particularly narrow section of the cave that the air began to change. The weight of the darkness pressed in on them, and the air thickened. It was the first warning, but they didn't recognize it until it was too late. The air grew stale, the oxygen levels dropping, and the oppressive silence deepened. Panic crept in slowly. What had been a thrilling adventure began to feel like a trap. The darkness was no longer a mystery. It was a suffocating presence, closing in on them. And then, one by one, the explorers began to feel it. The crushing weight of the cave, the tightening of their chests, the difficulty in breathing. The panic set in as their bodies realized what their minds had not yet accepted. It wasn't the rock walls that claimed them, it was the air. The oxygen had been slowly replaced by carbon dioxide, a silent killer. The explorers struggled for breath, each one gasping, as their lungs screamed for relief. But the air was thick, stagnant, and every breath felt like they were suffocating, trapped in a tomb of their own making. They tried to make their way back, but the cave had them now. Every turn was tighter, every step felt heavier. The oxygen had been stolen from their bodies, and with every passing second, their chances of escape dwindled. They knew it now. The darkness wasn't just around them, it was inside them, suffocating them from within. The hours passed in a haze of confusion, fear, and breathless panic, and in the end, it wasn't the rocks that held them, their bodies failed them. One by one they collapsed, unable to take another breath. When rescue teams finally arrived, it was too late. The cave had already claimed 6 lives. The explorers had been suffocated, not by rock, but by the very air around them. The Mossdale Caves, once a place of wonder, had become their tomb, and with it, their story was sealed forever. Even as one tragedy passed, the Plura Cave awaited. In February 2014, in the heart of Norway's Plura Cave, a group of divers would meet a fate darker than any cave had prepared for them. 5 experienced divers, trained and eager, entered the Plura Cave system with one goal: explore the depths, discover new paths, and push the limits of their craft. They were veterans of the sport, diving into some of the world's most dangerous caves. But on this fateful day, even their extensive training could not protect them from the suffocating terror that awaited them. The cave was treacherous, not for its narrow passages, but for the frigid ice-cold water that flooded its tunnels. As the divers descended, the temperature of the water dropped, and the deeper they went, the more their bodies screamed for warmth. They had passed the threshold of danger, but they didn't know yet how much worse it would become. At a depth of 110 meters, the first signs of horror began to surface. Patrick Grunkvist, one of the most experienced divers in the group, noticed his friend Jari Juotarinen was no longer behind him. Panic flared within Grunkvist, but he forced himself to stay calm. He turned around, searching through the murky waters, only to find Juotarinen trapped in a narrow crevice, tangled in a piece of his own equipment. The terror in his eyes was unmistakable. Juotarinen was stuck, his movements growing frantic as the suffocating pressure of the water bore down on him. The cold of the water, the unbearable pressure, and the choking fear. Grunkvist knew his friend was in danger. He tried to help, offering Juotarinen a gas cylinder to steady his breathing, but it was too late. In the deep, freezing dark, Juotarinen's struggle became more frantic until it stopped entirely. The body of his friend floated lifeless in the water before Grunkvist's eyes. Helpless, unable to save him. The cave was no longer an adventure. It was a tomb. Grunkvist, his heart heavy with the loss of his friend, had no choice but to continue deeper into the cave. Time was running out for the rest of them. The air was growing thinner, the pressure mounting. The water, frigid and unyielding, seemed to carry with it the weight of the tragedy that had already unfolded. One by one, the divers tried to make their way past Juotarinen's body, now blocking the narrow passage. Each diver, gripped by the same overwhelming fear, faced the decision: continue or turn back. The narrow, deadly path ahead would be their only chance at survival, but the cost was steep. Vesa Rantanen, another diver in the group, was the next to approach. He struggled to move past Juotarinen's body, each second dragging on as the clock ticked toward the inevitable. Finally, he managed to maneuver through, but the damage was done. The delay had cost him precious air. His decompression time would be much longer than anticipated, and as he swam toward the surface, the effects of decompression sickness began to set in. What was once an ordinary exploration had turned into a nightmare, where every move, every breath, carried the weight of life and death. The survivors would emerge, but they would not be the same. The weight of what had happened beneath the surface would haunt them forever. The bodies of Jari Juotarinen and his friend Kai Kankanen would remain below for days. A specialized rescue operation would eventually be launched to retrieve them from the freezing depths, but the toll had already been taken. And in the cold, unforgiving depths of Plura Cave, they had been lost to the darkness forever. In the darkness below, the earth waits. It claims those who dare to explore its depths, leaving only memories in the suffocating silence. These tragedies remind us of the fragility of life and the terrifying power of the unknown. If these chilling stories have haunted you, consider subscribing. Join us as we continue to uncover the terrifying truths hidden in the shadows and explore the darkness that lurks beneath the surface.